Today we're doing our 6th class in our Yogic Path in the Light. And this is all based in the 8 limbs of yoga. And the first 2 limbs are the Yamas and the Niyamas. And the Yamas are what they call the restraints, but really they're the things that help to keep us on our path. Again, we've talked about living in this very strange world, this very dark world that has a lot of strange foundational elements, like this idea that, having a high pain tolerance is a good idea, and, no pain, no gain, and suffering is normal. This has sort of been part of the weaving of our consciousness. And the yamas, the restraints, kind of help us not get distracted by those things and stay on our own path, kind of idea. So today we're talking about Saucha, which actually translates into purity or cleanliness or clearness. And this is a niyama. And a niyama is like an observance. That's probably the closest translation. But really, if the yamas say, here's how we don't get distracted by these things, the niyamas are, so here's what we're going to focus on. Here's what we're going to put our attention on. It's kind of like, how the mental body actually they say that the mental body works in pictures. So let's say somebody is climbing a tree. Let's say one of your children are climbing a tree and you don't want them to fall. If you say, don't fall, the brain records fall. It doesn't record fall with a big X on it because this child still sees falling, right? So instead you say, hold on. And you let the brain focus on hold on. And that's what's empowering. And that's like a niyama. These are the things we're going to focus on. Because as we focus on them, the energy goes toward them. And that's what expands our life. So it's really interesting to imagine this word Saucha. I mean, it's a Sanskrit word, but they would spell it Saucha. Because again, in this world of darkness, we think of the word purity, cleanliness, all that kind of thing. There's for me anyway, there's a judgment in there, right? That if you don't observe Saucha, you're impure. There's something wrong with you. I have impure thoughts. I have an impure lifestyle. I have an impure, and the hard thing with that is for centuries, this idea has been used to shame us. And shame is the most damaging thing that another person or an institution can oppress someone with, right? This is a real problem. So sometimes even the idea, as soon as I say purity, there's an initial pushback to say, don't you judge me. Don't you say that my world isn't pure. I can do whatever I want. Don't you tell me what I should eat and what I can't eat and what I can do, what I can't do, what I can think and I can't. I can do whatever I want. There's this massive pushback to it, right? Because of this world and because this idea, this actually beautiful spiritual idea, has been co-opted, bastardized, whatever, used by churches and institutions, families, whatever, to really oppress people and make people feel like they are sinful, unworthy, all these things. And I only mention this here because we kind of have to get it out of the way. We have to kind of go, okay, that's how it's been used in this past existence. And perhaps not even, it's probably happened in our own lives, right? For sure. But it's also rolling through our ancestral memory. It's like the pool we're swimming in. And that's why the yogic path is so interesting, because the yogic path is always about you living your perfect life. Whatever your perfect, individuated, divine, physical path is. And every single one of us has a perfectly unique path. And that's what yoga is always about. It's never about living according to someone else's ideals. Even though in the yoga community they'll say, you should only eat this, and you should only do this, and you should practice this way. That is often how it's been passed down, because it's kind of getting passed down. That's just what happens in Kali Yuga, or however we want to understand this time we've been living in. But really, it's always about satya, truth. That truth that goes from our 7th chakra all the way down to our 1st chakra, that says, why was I put here? This soul, this DNA sequence, this assignment. This is the point of yoga, to bring all of us back together as a whole, open our eyes, and just walk that path with clarity. So then the question becomes, what if you only had things in your life that truly nourished you? That really expanded your path, that had nothing to do with anyone else? What if you only ate the food that nourished your body specifically? You know, they say that diet's a huge topic, right? The most interesting person I've ever actually studied diet with was my friend who used to teach a course called Food Dharma at my train station. And he was like a Chinese medicine guy. And he used to, because people used to say, well, what's the ideal diet? And he said, well, I kind of figure there's 7.5 billion ideal diets on the planet, because every one of us is so perfectly unique, you know? And so it's a very interesting thing to imagine, what's your perfect diet? What actually suits you best? No judgment, no nothing, just actually based on your own experience. What makes you feel bright and shiny? What gives you energy? Like, you can already feel like there's all this like judgment, shame, like it's all just whirling around us, right? But it's like, just let all that go. Just like shake it off and just sort of go, no, really. What are the thought patterns that really keep me clear on my path? If I was to explore my emotional state, how do I experience emotions that really help guide me on my path? That emotions act like a beautiful biofeedback mechanism that help me constantly self-correct and take me towards the things I love and away from the things that are bad from me. Right? What are the philosophies that really expand my consciousness here? You know, I recently read this, probably in one of the books, or I heard it, I don't know. But it was really interesting. It was a guru speaking, and he was saying how when he turned 16, he was initiated. And that in his tradition, if you were studying in a past life, a particular tradition, when you are reborn, if you're meant to continue that study, the initiation will begin again at age 16, and you will simply continue. So now imagine this, forgetting about, whether it's 16 or 56, we don't worry about that. But isn't it interesting how sometimes you pick up a book and the philosophy of this book, or a teaching, or whatever, and you go, boy, this resonates. Like, you just know this already. Like, you're just picking up from where you left off. This is a very interesting awareness to have inside of us. This is part of Saucha. It's like, aha, this is an ingredient. This is part of my world. And I'm going to focus on it to the exclusion of the things that aren't me. And this is really an interesting thing, because in our education system, for example, we're taught that we have to know all the things. We have to understand a bit of this, we have to know math, we have to know art, we have to be an athlete, we have to know French, well in Canada, we have to know this, we have to know that. And if we don't know all of the things, we're not smart, right? You have to know all of the things. Now, so imagine instead your body is like this cauldron. Let's imagine we are an alchemical process, that we are always transforming. So we have this beautiful cauldron, which is our being, our DNA sequence, our body, our mind, our aura, however you understand it. And within that cauldron, we're going to put in all the ingredients for this soul's journey. But just the ingredients for this soul's journey. If calculus isn't part of your soul's journey, you don't want it in the cauldron. If athletics isn't part of your soul's journey, then you don't want it in the cauldron. You know, if politics isn't part of your journey, you don't want it in the cauldron. So the problem is, or the challenge is, oftentimes we spend a big part of the middle to last part of our life pulling bits out of the cauldron that aren't ours. Some of them are the opinions of our parents or the opinions of the church or the society we were raised in or whatever. And we've got to keep pulling them out of the cauldron because, you know, they're not part of my journey. And the problem is, so you have this cauldron and the transformative process of life starts with fire, right? Fire is what life is about. But we have a cauldron, we have the ingredients of our life, and then we have the fire. Well, what happens if there's all kinds of impurities in the cauldron? And this isn't some shameful impurity. This is just something that isn't you. Well, what happens in our life when we have elements of our life that are 100% us, and there's something in our life that isn't? It messes with the flow. You're always adapting to that weird thing that's not really you. You're complaining about it, you're analyzing, you're chewing about it, you're worrying about it, you're stressing about it, you're talking to your friends about it, you're dreaming about it, you're journaling about it. It's kind of like, you know, even if you imagine it like food, you know, you imagine you eat food and maybe it's crappy food. Like maybe, you know, you're just like, oh, I'm just going on a binge and eating a pile of fried food and blah, blah, blah. Well, there's nothing evil about fried food, but it will slow the liver down, which is why I love my friend who teaches food dharma, because he would always say that if you see yourself being called to eating a lot of fried food, it isn't about judgment. It's just simply about going, isn't that interesting that right now I'm really seeking to slow my liver down, which normally means that I'm feeling too many emotions that I can't handle. And he just said, just observe it. Still eat the food. Don't worry about it. But I just love that because it's like, that's interesting. Or if we're really going for a lot of comfort foods, to not judge the fact that we're eating comfort food, but to actually look at ourselves and say, why do I need so much comfort food right now? That's interesting. We still take the comfort, but we also allow it into our consciousness that something must be amok, that I'm feeling sad right now, you know? So, and the challenge again with a lot of the comfort food or the fried food or whatever it is that we're taking into our bodies is our bodies don't necessarily know how to digest it properly. You know, that's why they're bad for us, because the body struggles to digest it and then it has to turn and we get indigestion and maybe we get constipated or maybe we end up it having to come out of our skin or whatever, right? And it's the same with emotional things. We chew on it, we get indigestion, we can't sleep at night, you know, kind of thing, right? So there's a real beauty in actually saying, you know what really works for me? And if we're feeling called to things in our lives, whether it's food or people or thoughts or the news or scary movies or toxic friendships or whoever, like if we feel ourselves drawn to these things, to kind of just sit back with real love and say, why am I eating this, feeling this, hanging out with this person? What's under that? Is there a karmic pattern here? Is there something I'm supposed to look at? You know? Because when our goal is actually to only have friendships that are joyful, that nourish us. That changes everything. When our goal is to actually only eat food that nourishes us, it just gives us different eyes on things. So again, it's not about the judgment. It's just about saying, when I only have things, ideas in my life that nourish me, my life only expands. And all of a sudden, all the different things in my consciousness also start to fit together. So for example, we talk about healing a lot. And my favorite definition of healing is that it's coming to wholeness. And in many ways, we aren't whole because we've been split apart for some reason. Some part of us has said, no, there's something wrong with this other part of us. This part is okay, but this part isn't. So it's almost like we've tried to sever it off. Like, okay, I'd like to sever that off and push it away. I'd like to get rid of that part so that I can only be this bright and shiny person because I don't like this. I don't like that part of me. I don't like part of that part of my story. I don't like it. I just want to let that go. So what caused the division? What caused that break in the stone? It's an impurity. It's a judgment. It's a philosophy that says there's something wrong with that thing. There's something wrong with you. There's something wrong that happened to you. That philosophy is an impurity. So when we replace that, so now you imagine, so if we want to come to a place of healing, we want to get to the root of whatever that thing is that caused that crevice and that crack inside of us. We want to look at it and we want to say, hold on, what's the truth? What's the clearness? So it's interesting, Saucha means purity, cleanliness, and clearness. It means a zillion things, it's Sanskrit, but those are some of the three big ones. So now what happens? We go into that crevice and we start cleaning it out, bit by bit, going, okay, yeah, that doesn't belong on my path, and that's no good, and that's just something my grandmother said, and that's something I learned, and no, that's not. And we just keep cleaning it out until we get right down to the bottom of it, and it's all gone. And we replace it with the true philosophy that maybe every part of my journey matters. The difficult, the happy, the challenging, the ecstatic, it's all part of this DNA sequence for some reason. And one day I'll understand it all. And then bit by bit, this all goes into the cauldron, and then suddenly we get to invite that part of us back, and we get to integrate it, and it gets to be part of who we are again. This is Saucha. We cannot be whole if we have all of these weird ideas in there kind of messing up with, like I think of if people make clay pots, how important it is that the clay has no impurities in it. Because what happens when it goes into the kiln if there's an impurity in it? It cracks. So this idea of really consciously going into our lives with a fine-tooth comb and saying, not this, that's not mine, this is not my path, this is not my path. This really matters. This is really, really powerful work. It's an important part of our yogic path. So we often think of 4 different bodies. We think of a lot of different bodies when it comes to yoga. We think of our physical body. We think of our mental body or bodies. We think of our emotional body. We think of our spiritual body. But I really just want to talk about the three bodies, because our spiritual body is actually clear. And when our physical, mental, and emotional bodies are clear, our spiritual body's mint, right? That we've talked about that in all the chakra talks, the chakra 2.0 talks, that our chakras are perfect. But we have this interesting interface between this beautiful perfection inside and this very curious world on the outside. And that is this mental body, emotional body, physical body, right? So in the Hatha yoga tradition, the true Hatha yoga tradition that incorporates asana and stuff like that, but Hatha yoga is very much about meeting God through the body, where other paths of yoga like Raja yoga is more about meeting God or integrating self through meditation, or Jnana yoga, which is about, I am a classic Jnana yogi. This is what brings me joy, all of these books. If I'm ever spinning out on the planet, I could pick one of these books, open it up, read for like 5 minutes, and my whole body rests. A Hatha yogi wants to do sun salutations or some kind of physical practice. That's what will bring them to peace, But deeper in the Hatha tradition is something called, what are they called? Shut karmas. And shut karmas are these purification kriyas. They actually call it kriya, just means to cleanse. And they're all of these cleansing rituals that sometimes you might have heard of them, and some of them are pretty common and some of them are pretty esoteric that you really only want to practice with a trained professional. And I'm going to mention them, not because I think you should do them, but I think it's an interesting way of understanding our emotional and mental bodies in terms of the physical practices. And the other interesting thing to consider is that even if at this point, right now, you feel like you are living in a very pure state, like it's so funny, right? It's such a hard word to say because it's just been used in such bad ways or in such dysfunctional or unhelpful ways. We live in a world filled with all kinds of other. Whether it's the air, whether it's the food, whether it's the news, whether it's topics of conversation, whether it's fears, whether it's ancestral trauma, who knows? So it's always interesting and this is why I include the shut karmas here, because to imagine a purification process that is ongoing, that we're always kind of taking care of ourselves. We're always checking the engine, we're always sort of taking stock. Is anything stuck that doesn't belong? Where am I now? Like this is where regular yoga practice or regular walking on the beach or whatever your yoga is so valuable, because we're always in a state of flux. We're always interacting with the world around us. What have we brought in? Like I know for me, I love learning. Even yesterday having this experience at the dentist, and triggering all this trauma and different things. That's another experience that's now sort of flowing through my system again. Might require a bit of cleansing, right? Might require a bit of meditation, might require a bit of pranayama, might require something to help move that experience through me. So in the same way that we might, go out and have a great fun and eat nachos and drink beer and I don't know, maybe smoke cigars and stuff. I don't know what we're doing. And then maybe we go, kind of need a bit of a fast now to just let the body rest, So just to allow, and this is why these shut karmas are very interesting, whether you do these specifically or you do some kind of version for yourself. One of the most common shut karmas is neti. And this is where you see the neti pots, right? To cleanse this whole area. You see the neti pot where they have the saline solution and they put it in one nostril and out the other. In some traditions, they'll actually take a tube that they'll actually go through the nose and out the mouth, and they'll cleanse it that way. Like they'll pour the saline solution that way. Again, this is where, like, I'm not saying you should go home and try this. I'm just saying these are some of the processes. Another common one is like colon irrigation. It's a kind of enema, and they do it all kinds of fancy ways. And again, only you with a proper practitioner you would do this. But even imagine that, whether it's an enema or whatever kind of thing, to actually every so often, mentally, emotionally, everything, sometimes we just have to let it all go. Like we just have to okay, you know what? There's just too much going on. And maybe we need to watch a movie that makes us cry, or maybe we just need to have a good friend over and we just need to rant. Just let it all out. Or maybe we just need to do a really good yoga kriya that makes us sweat and makes us angry and just brings up all those emotions, and we just and we just let it all out. It's an interesting thing. Another common karma is Kapalbhati, which is like breath of fire that we do in Kundalini yoga. And Kapalbhati, it actually means shining skull breath, because they talk about this frontal cortex, that develops around age 8, 12, that time, where we actually are able to have imagination, right? It's a very positive thing. But unfortunately, in a world of difficulty and darkness, it's also used to house our fears. And our imagination creates all kinds of scenarios that we then have to live through for the rest of our lives if we're not careful. So if we do a strong breath of fire, a strong Kapalbhati, we do these kind of breath techniques, these kind of pranayamas, they actually clear the cobwebs out of here. They help us get rid of all those fear programs that maybe have nothing to do with us. This is why it helps us on our path of Saucha. We don't need to walk through fearful scenarios, right? That is not why we were put here. Another really common shat karma is Chaticum, like candle gazing. But it doesn't have to be candle gazing. It could be even going for a walk and finding a beautiful tree and sitting down and gazing at the tree and allowing your focus to be total. That's all Chaticum is. Pick a rose. Pick a beautiful, sometimes they would say look in the eyes of a guru, but find one thing to gaze upon and sit and gaze upon it. This is Chaticum. And what does it do? It clears our mind. One of the reasons that we candle gaze is you have a candle sitting in front of you. It's very, very simple. You put a candle sitting in front of you and you close your eyes and you breathe. Here on Insight Timer, I have a meditation called Kaya Stherium. And Kaya Stherium is something that's very helpful to use right before you do Chaticum, because it helps to still the body. So if you do Kaya Stherium and then you open your eyes and you gaze at the candle and you stare at the candle until you almost think you can see it right here in your third eye. And then you close your eyes, and oftentimes the candle will appear right here. So now you sit in meditation, breathing deeply, focusing on the image of the candle in your third eye. And as soon as it starts to go away, just close your eye, then open your eyes again and stare at the candle until it's back. Close your eyes and stare here. And this is the process of Chaticum. And what it does is it teaches us singular focus. And eventually, after maybe you practice this for a month, every day or every couple days or something like that, eventually you don't need the candle. You just sit in meditation and a candle appears. And now you have this beautiful singular focus in a clear mind, a pure mind. And not a pure, like Puritan, we have to get rid of that. A purely you mind with no distraction, no other people in our mind, just you in the cosmos, just you and God. So something like a Chaticum is so powerful for whatever it is that works for you, whether it's sitting by the ocean, whether it's sitting in the woods, whatever allows this singular focus that lets the world fall away and you're left with just you. This is Saucha. So if you imagine, sorry, I just have to shift here. So then we imagine mentally living Saucha in our mind. So oftentimes if you Google Saucha, they'll often talk about decluttering your space, making your home a very clear space, clearing your fridge, going through your cupboards, going through your closet, only have in your world that's something really current for you right now. Personally, I find this more to be a mental clearing. We may do it in our physical space, but again, in the land of these shat karmas, this perpetual cleansing, like imagine the body, for example. The body is always in a state of cleansing, right? That's why the cells are constantly renewing themselves. Life is happening. We have sunshine, we sweat, we eat food, we have conversation. The body is constantly sending enzymes and fixing this and sorting that and then excreting what we're finished with. So it's a very interesting practice to do that with our surroundings, with our mind, with our emotions, to always look around and say, is this still current in my life? To go through your bookshelf and just say, is that still current in my life? Is it part of my journey now, or is it part of yesterday's journey? When I when I was married and my kids were young, and I had a busy household, I used to take a box when I cleaned the house on Saturdays. I used to take a box and I would walk around the house and I would just fill it with anything that wasn't current. And of course, my kids were growing, so it was really easy that there were always things that weren't current. So I would go into their bedrooms when they were little, and I would go through their drawers, and whatever shirts or socks or whatever didn't fit them anymore, they would all go in the box. And then I would go through the toys and things I didn't play with would go in the box. And then I would go through my books, and books they would go in the box. And I would go along the mantles, and I would say, okay, I don't really even like that anymore. And I put that in the box. And I would go through the kitchen and I would be like, I don't really ever use that. And I put that in the box. I go through my own cupboards, my own closets, and I would go, I don't ever wear that. And I put that in the box. And I would make these little boxes that would go to the secondhand store. And it wasn't like some massive cleanse. It was just like a weekly little, maybe not weekly, but it was really interesting. So that's to me about decluttering, like even being able to go into your fridge and to mentally not have to go through all the things you're never going to eat, but just the only thing in there are the things you do eat. There's something really interesting in Patanjali's Sutras where he talks about Saucha. The sutra, as it says, that when we are focused on Saucha, hold on, I gotta remember. When we are focused on Saucha, our path becomes clear, right? Because we aren't being distracted by all the things we're not, all the things that have nothing to do with us. There's someone else's stuff, there's stuff that I used a year ago, there's stuff I thought about 3 years ago, whatever. This is no longer my path, this is my past. What is my future? What is my current? So mentally it's very interesting. It's interesting even to sit, if you sit in meditation and you have thoughts going through your mind, to really ask yourself, are these today's thoughts, really? In previous talks, I've talked about David Bohm, my favorite quantum physicist. And one thing, he was really interested in human consciousness. And he used to talk about the difference between thinking and what he called thoughting. And he said, and thoughting isn't a real word, but he basically said the problem is when we think we're thinking, we often aren't. Thinking assumes that we're actually thinking in the current time. He said, but most of the time we're just repeating thoughts from the past. We're not here at all. And if we're actually just thinking thoughts from the past, to say we're thinking isn't true. It'd be more accurate to say that we're thoughting. That's really an interesting thing to ponder. Are these thoughts in my mind current? And then to ask ourselves, why am I stuck? Are those thoughts, is it time to let them go? Is it time to have new thoughts? Is it time to have thoughts that are current for my current incarnation that I woke up today in, my current realization? Decluttering our mind means living in our satya, living in our true path, whatever that is, and everything else, allowing it just to fall to the wayside. It's just not our path. We don't even have to reject it. It's just not ours, right? And that could be an opinion. It could be a thought. It could be this going on. It could be something you read in a book, right? Like even for me, like I'm reading these books about Tantra, about these ancient rites. And one of the things that is very common is the idea of the requirement of an initiation by a guru. And I've been thinking about that a lot lately, wondering, is this an important thing? Is this necessary? Is this part of what I'm gathering into my consciousness? But I'm just pondering it. I'm kind of like throwing it around, seeing if it sticks anywhere. Is it part of my satya? Is it part of my path? And it comes out of one of these cool books. I don't have to reject it. I don't have to make it wrong. All I have to know is it part of my path? Is it something I need to consider? That's all. And that's how we can walk through life. You don't have to be wrong. You just have exactly the right opinion for you, and I have the exact opinion for me. That's all. Another beautiful way to live in Saucha is that beginner's mind, right? To let it all go. It's kind of like that, that mental enema, the colon cleansing of the shut karmas. Just let it all go and just live in this beautiful, clear space. And then see what I want to add to it instead. Instead of dealing with all the old stuff, what do I want to add to this beautiful, clear canvas? The other thing with Saucha that's a very practical thing to consider is our language. To really imagine that the words you speak to other people and to yourself, to really try to make sure that they reflect your truth all the time, especially the language you use to use for yourself. To really ask yourself, are these words mine? Are these words, like if I was to put these words, this self-talk, into my cauldron that I'm creating of my life, do they belong in there? And if they don't, to look at them, to do the cleanliness rituals, to do whatever you've got to do. And then maybe find the self-talk that is on your path, that is your Saucha. And then when we speak to other people, to really keep to our pure thought. And again, I'm really triggered by this word. Probably because I was raised by very religious people. But, to really be try to be as clear as you can with our words. Because even though someone else might be hearing our words, I'm hearing my words more than anyone. I'm the one actually saying them. And those sounds are like mantras resonating through my body. Whether I sit and chant, Om Namo, whether I chant it to resonate sound through my body because it's in Sanskrit, or I speak to you, it's the same resonance that's going through my body. So the words I speak affect my body and affect my life's path. It's not just about the energy we're putting out in the world. It's all here, all the time. It's a very interesting, to me, very practical, beautiful way of living Saucha. And the last thing I want to mention is our emotional body. And if you imagine that our physical, mental, and emotional bodies, they're all the same. If you imagine every atom that we are, like this multidimensional diamond. And if you look at the diamond from one angle, you see our physical body. And if you look at our body from another, if you look at that diamond from another angle, you see our mental body. And if you look at it from another angle, you see our emotional body. And maybe you could continue in your radiant body and your aural body and your pranic body and all that kind of thing. So it's all the same. So again, if you affect your physical body, if you change your physical body, it affects your mental body and emotional body. Affect your mental body, it affects the emotional body, the physical body. And not because it affects it, it's all the same. So it all just changes. So it's the same thing with our emotional body. To really be clear that our emotions are pure. And again, not a judgment that there are bad emotions or good emotions, nothing like that. But that our emotions are actually ours. And that they're current in this moment, in this time, right now. That the emotions I'm feeling are mine. They're not my partners, they're not my parents, they're not my kids, they're not my neighbors, they're mine. Our emotions are our biofeedback mechanism. We can't adjust ourselves because of someone else's emotional state. But we also can't adjust ourselves properly if we are living out a past emotional state of our own. And this goes back to a similar thing with the thinking and the thoughting. That oftentimes I can say, well, I'm feeling really sad. Am I? Am I feeling sad? Or am I felting? Am I feeling an old feeling over and over and over again? And this happens a lot. This happens a lot in trauma. This happens a lot in life. That we have a feeling. Now, feelings we're supposed to just roll through. We're just supposed to roll through them. Right? But often what happens is instead of just rolling through the feeling, somewhere in there, especially if it happens a lot, a thought form attaches to that feeling and creates a story. And then all of a sudden, instead of this flowing, it starts to loop. And the feeling starts to loop. And we don't get out of it. And the thought keeps repeating the story. Remember that time? Remember that time? The body doesn't know the difference, whether the trauma is happening now or it happened 10 years ago. And now we're felting. The key to talking about this is it's really important to do whatever we can to heal that loop, to remove the thought form so that we can feel naturally again, to do whatever it takes to actually get to a place where I'm only feeling in this moment. Because I can't live my path if I'm stuck in a loop from my past. Right? That's the bottom line. Because I'm literally living in a past timeline. So whatever we need, whether it's counseling or journaling or somatic release therapy, whatever it is we need to release something from the past so that we can come into this moment and actually experience our emotions with clearness, whether they're happy, sad, angry, prideful, joyful, ecstatic, doesn't matter. But we have to be able to flow through them, right? This is really, really important. And one of my favorite ways of looking at Saucha is like this beautiful canvas. And if we want to live our life, right? We wake up today and we have this beautiful life to live. We really want this canvas to be clear. We don't want any impurities on it. We don't want other people's junk and our ancestors' beliefs or whatever. We don't want that. We want a clear canvas. So it's really good to do whatever it takes to keep that canvas clear, emotionally, mentally, physically. And then we actually get to live our life. And very exciting. This is Saucha. I'm going to put my glass. What if they are subconscious? Like, what if the thoughts are subconscious? You know, the beautiful thing about the subconscious is the subconscious always wants to heal. It always wants to remove. It's almost like, you know, when you have a wound, it'll fester because the impurities want out. So what's interesting is anything that's in our subconscious that's ready to heal will be coming out. It'll come out in emotional outbursts. It will come out in patterns. It will come out in maybe an illness. It will come out in all kinds of ways. And it's even interesting, like, so I teach Kundalini yoga. And one of the interesting things about Kundalini yoga is that the Kundalini lies dormant in the first chakra, in this thing called the Khanda. And as we do yoga, or as we do practice, it stimulates this Khanda. And the Kundalini tries to move. But if we have all kinds of sort of blockages, it can't go very far. But as we continue practice, whatever it is, it'll slowly start to jostle it. It'll start to almost create a festering of these wounds. So depending on what you're struggling with, maybe it's a pranayama. Maybe it's doing a daily practice. And there's something really powerful about telling your body, telling your consciousness that I'm up for it. Whatever's lying in my subconscious, I want to know. Because the reason it's in our subconscious is because previously, maybe things happened when we were a child or when we were a young adult and we didn't have the ability to handle it. So we consciously, with our psyche, repressed it. We did that. We said, I can't handle this. I need to put it in my subconscious, and maybe later I can look at it. So it's almost like we actually need to say, all right, now I want to look at it, and maybe create a practice that every day you maybe just sit doing a pranayama for 10 minutes. Or you sit and meditate, or you wake up every morning and you do morning papers, like in the artist way, and you allow the stream of consciousness to come out. But you just create a daily practice of dedication that, no, I really want to look at this now. Pages. Oh, yeah. Sometimes I also love evening pages. That was actually a practice, apparently, of Pythagoras. Anyway, it came out of a book I read a long time ago about the golden verses of Pythagoras or something. And he recommended to his students every night to sit down and write evening pages and look at your day. Look at the things that were in line with your soul. Look at the things that you wish you could have done differently, not from a judgment place, but from an awareness place that isn't that interesting that I did that again? You know? And it just was sort of that before you go to bed at night to kind of clear your consciousness of everything. And that's really helpful, especially if you struggle to sleep or to have a good sleep, to kind of just empty your mind that way. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you soon.